In the summer of 1907, in the Red Clay Hills just outside Thomasville, Georgia, a man drove a pickaxe into the hardest ground his neighbors had ever seen, and they all laughed. Not a polite chuckle, a full, belly-shaking, hands-on-knees kind of laugh. Because what Elijah Mordecai Tanner was doing made absolutely no sense to anyone watching. He was digging holes, 600 of them, across 14 rocky acres that the county extension office had already written off as unfit for productive agriculture. The soil was thin. The limestone jutted up through the red clay like broken teeth. The local farmers had tried corn here in 1899. It died. They tried sweet potato in 1903. Also died. But Elijah Tanner wasn't planting corn. He wasn't planting sweet potatoes. He was planting banana trees. 600 banana trees. On the worst land in Thomas County. And if you think the laughing stopped when he finished digging, you don't know small-town Georgia in the early 1900s. Now, before you write Elijah off as a fool, you need to understand something about the man. Because Elijah Mordecai Tanner was not a fool. He was, by most measures, the most quietly observant man in Thomasville. Born in 1869 to a family of tenant farmers in Decatur County, Elijah had spent his entire childhood watching other people's land produce other people's wealth. He'd picked cotton before he could properly read. He'd watched droughts take entire harvests in weeks. He'd buried a season's worth of hope in hard soil more times than he could count. By the time he scraped together enough money to purchase his own 14 acres in 1905, Elijah wasn't looking to repeat what everyone else was doing. He was looking for what everyone else had missed. He didn't talk about it much. That was the thing about Elijah. He watched more than he spoke. He read agricultural journals that arrived 2 months late by post. He corresponded by letter with a horticulturist in Florida named Dr. Harold Baines, who had been documenting the success of Gros Michel banana cultivation in the Gulf Coast region. He took notes. He asked questions. He tested the soil pH on his rocky 14 acres, something most farmers in 1907 Georgia had never even thought to do. And what he found surprised him. His soil, for all its rockiness, was slightly alkaline, not acidic like most of the surrounding farmland. And bananas, it turned out, could tolerate a wider range of soil conditions than almost any staple crop being grown in South Georgia. The limestone underneath, it could actually serve as a slow-release calcium source. The drainage was excellent, because the rocks didn't let water sit and rot the roots. Elijah Tanner saw something nobody else saw, but here's what nobody knew yet. And this is where the story gets really interesting. It was March of 1907 when Elijah placed his order. 60 bundles of Gros Michel rhizomes shipped by rail from a nursery in Tampa, Florida. Each bundle could yield roughly 10 planting starts, 600 trees total, if everything survived the transit. He'd spent 3 years saving. He'd sold firewood, done hired fencing work, repaired wagon wheels for the Hargrove family's spread over on Old Monticello Road. Every spare cent went into a tin box under his floorboards. When the crates arrived at the Thomasville Rail Depot, word spread fast. Everybody came to look. Old man Cresswell, who farmed tobacco on the best bottomland in the county, walked the full 2 miles just to shake his head. "Bananas," Cresswell reportedly said, arms folded, "on that rock pile." And the laughing started. It didn't stop when Elijah began digging in April. His wife Clara and their 3 children worked beside him every morning before the heat came up. They dug holes 18 inches deep. They packed in compost made from kitchen scraps and leaf mulch Elijah had been building in a corner of the property for 2 full years. They planted the rhizomes. They watered by hand from a cistern Elijah had built the previous fall. Neighbors stopped by the fence regularly, some out of curiosity, some out of mockery. At least one man, a deacon at the First Baptist Church on Jackson Street, offered Elijah a polite, concerned warning that he was throwing good money into bad soil. Elijah thanked him and kept digging. Here's what people don't understand about banana cultivation. It is not a fast business. In the Gulf South climate, a Gros Michel banana plant takes anywhere from 9 to 15 months from planting to its first fruit. That means Elijah Tanner and his family spent the rest of 1907 and the better part of 1908 tending trees that produced nothing. Nothing. Through the summer of 1907, his neighbors harvested corn. They sold tobacco at the Thomasville market. They had money. Elijah had green shoots coming up through the rocks and a tin box that was now empty. Clara Tanner, by most accounts, never once questioned her husband. She had married a quiet man who thought longer and harder than anyone else she'd ever known, and she had decided early in their marriage that when Elijah committed to something, you stayed the course. The children, James, Ruth, and little Samuel, watered those trees in the evening heat like it was sacred work. But the fall of 1907 came hard. A drought gripped the lower half of Georgia from August through October. It was one of the worst in 15 years. The creeks dropped. The wells went shallow. Corn shriveled on the stalk across 3 counties. Tobacco farmers lost 30% of their yield. The bottom fell out of prices at market because everyone was trying to sell the same half-ruined harvest at the same time. Families in the surrounding area began to feel the pinch. Not starvation, not yet, but the particular anxiety of a farming community watching its cushion disappear. And Elijah Tanner? His banana trees, with their deep roots pushing down into the limestone and their drought-hardy rhizome systems, barely flinched. By the spring of 1908, something remarkable was beginning to happen on those 14 rocky acres. The banana plants had grown to 8, 9, 10 feet tall. Their broad green leaves spread wide and caught every bit of moisture the morning dew could offer. The root systems had pushed deep into cracks in the limestone and found water sources that the shallow-rooted corn and tobacco never could have reached. And then, in June of 1908, 15 months after the first rhizome went into the ground, Elijah Tanner walked out one morning to find the first heavy bunches of Gros Michel bananas hanging ripe and gold in the Georgia dawn. He didn't say a word to anyone at first. He just stood there and looked at what 4 years of saving, 2 years of compost building, and 15 months of patient tending had produced. Then he went inside, woke Clara, and showed her. Word travels fast in a small county when something unexpected happens. Within a week, the story was moving through Thomasville faster than Elijah's bananas were ripening. Because here was the thing nobody had anticipated. The harvest didn't come all at once. Banana plants stagger their fruit production across weeks and months. Different trees ripen at different times. Where a corn crop comes in all at once, and then it's over, Elijah's 600 trees produced a rolling, continuous harvest from June through October. While every other farm in Thomas County was either selling off dry season reserves at deflated prices or eating into what they'd stored, Elijah Tanner was harvesting fresh fruit, week after week. He sold some. He traded some. He gave some away. And then the dry season of 1908 arrived, hotter and harder than the year before. By August of 1908, the situation in the farming communities surrounding Thomasville had grown genuinely difficult. Families who had depended on summer crops were watching reserves shrink. Children were eating smaller portions. The fear of a lean winter was moving through the community like a low, persistent hum. Elijah Tanner opened his gates. He didn't make a speech about it. He didn't call a town meeting or put a notice in the Thomasville Times-Enterprise. He simply let it be known, through Clara, through the children, through quiet word of mouth, that anyone who needed food could come to his land and take bananas. And they came. Families who had laughed at him, neighbors who had shaken their heads over the fence. Old man Cresswell, who had farmed tobacco on the best bottomland in the county, showed up one afternoon with a cart and a look on his face that was equal parts gratitude and humility. Elijah helped him load the cart. Through August and into September, the Tanner property became something remarkable, a farm that was not only surviving the dry season, but feeding a community through it. Historians who later documented agricultural resilience in the post-Reconstruction South would point to stories exactly like this one. Individual farmers who trusted unconventional knowledge over conventional wisdom and found yield where others found only rock. The county extension office, which had once labeled Elijah's land unfit for productive agriculture, sent a representative to walk the property in the fall of 1908. His report, filed in October of that year, described the 14 acres as an extraordinary example of adaptive cultivation in marginal soil conditions, and recommended that the Gros Michel rhizome be made available to other farms across Thomas County. 600 trees, 14 rocky acres. One man who read the journals, tested the soil, and kept digging while everyone else laughed. Here's what Elijah Tanner understood that nobody around him did in 1907. The land that everyone else rejected wasn't bad land. It was misunderstood land. The soil that couldn't grow what everyone else was growing could grow something else entirely, something better suited to exactly those conditions. The drought that destroyed his neighbor's yields was the same drought his deep-rooted banana plants barely noticed. Adversity revealed what abundance had hidden. In the years that followed, Elijah expanded his operation. He brought on 2 hired hands by 1912. He corresponded with agricultural colleges. He trained his son James, who would go on to farm some of the most productive land in South Georgia by the 1930s. But Elijah Mordecai Tanner never forgot the lesson of 1907. He reportedly told James later in life, "Don't let a man with good land tell you what your land can't do. Find what your land can do, and do it better than anyone." That advice, simple as it sounds, is worth more than any extension office report ever written. Because sometimes the land everyone laughs at is exactly the land that feeds a village. If this story moved you, if there's something in Elijah Tanner's quiet determination that spoke to you, then you belong in this community. Every week, we bring you stories just like this one. Real people, real land, real decisions that change the course of a farm, a family, or an entire county.